So I'm very excited to be able to talk to Jon Hodgson today. You're a game designer and artist who has worked on quite a number of projects, including D&D, The One Ring, Pathfinder, among a bunch of others. But then today, the main thing we're here to talk about is Beowulf, Age of Heroes, and your upcoming King Beowulf. So thank you very much for making a terrific RPG, first off, and then thanks for joining me.
Well, no, thank you for inviting me, and you're very welcome. Thanks for your enthusiasm for Beowulf, Age of Heroes.
Yeah, I've been loving it.
It's great. It's great. Cool.
So to start, can you just tell me kind of how you got started with RPGs, either as a player, and then how did you transition into doing it professionally?
So, God, I was thinking about this the other day. I watched your video with Gar Hanrahan, and I thought, oh yeah, right, yeah. Think about these questions. So I started playing. I got into role playing games through, much like a lot of people in the UK, fighting fantasy books, which were paperback sized books that would sort of choose your own adventure thing. And then they put out a book that was actually a proper role-playing game. It was almost this sort of stealth role-playing game where it's, multiplayer, actual, D&D like game. And I played that a bit. Prior to that, I'd been playing Talisman with a neighbor, which was, I really, really enjoyed. That super captured my imagination. I was probably, probably 9. It all probably happened for me in the same kind of year. That I just didn't know anything like that existed, and it was just super magical. When I discovered all that, the Gary Chalk artwork, I just thought of the first edition we were playing. It was all black and white, but that really fired my imagination. And then then from sort of the fighting fantasy multiplayer game into a game called Dragon Warriors, which again very common in the UK, less so in the States, but popular I know in Canada and Australia and New Zealand. And that, again, was presented in little paperback books that were quite easy to get hold of. And I loved that. There was a reissue done by James Wallace of Magnum Opus Press. He reissued it, and I did all the covers for that, which was brilliant a few years ago. I say a few years ago. It was probably 15 years ago now, terrifyingly. Everything's a few years ago. And then the usual D&D, got into playing at school, D&D, and then through the sort of late 80s we played pretty much everything. A lot of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, a lot of RuneQuest, all sorts of stuff. Indiana Jones we played for a while.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's a roleplay game. The Diana Jones Awards comes from Indiana Jones role-playing game.
Okay.
Burned cover of that, and it was reduced down to Diana Jones. It's weird. It's not super commonly known that. But anyway, yes. So the pretty much standard stuff. And then I always drew characters for our games.
Right.
And I always wanted to be an artist pretty much. And so I did. But right. I was very lucky to be able to just keep on pursuing that. Always wanted to be an illustrator, trained as a fine artist. So I did abstract painting at art school.
Awesome. Did you first get into working with RPGs through doing art and then into writing, or was it the other way around?
Yeah. It was art first of all. I have always written, which sort of surprises some people. I've always written, but professionally, sort of later on. That was during my time. My first sort of real published stuff, writing-wise, was probably on The One Ring. But I was I transitioned into that through editing and talking to writers and things like. We went for a bit of a phase where it was a struggle to get people that really understood this sounds crazy, but how a sentence is constructed. And it sort of slowly came to realize, wait, I do a lot of writing. I don't necessarily write RPGs, but I'd always in between all of this, as a sort of late teen, I did a lot of live action role play. And we ran a club for money, unbelievably, for actual money. People paid us, and we were 18, and we ran twice a month, and we ran 2 3-hour adventures for people in this woodland. And we took money, and that was brilliant discipline. But we had to do it. You've got to write an adventure. We would take turns, the sort of group of us that did it. But that was an incredible education, actually, in face to face with, say, a party of 10 people. And you were also running a group of monsters of a similar size. That was quite useful. I never expected that to stand me in such good stead, actually, but it was a real sharp end kind of experience. So, yeah.
And then with your artwork, I love the artwork in Beowulf. Is it digital or is it physical? It definitely looks like it has
it's digital.
3D physical. Okay.
I like it to look somewhat. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about trying to fake traditional media. I mean, I trained with traditional media, so it's just how I paint. But there's one art package I use called Art Rage that does really nice sort of impasto brush strokes, and I love it for that. So yeah, that's probably where that's coming from. So yeah.
So then, Beowulf. How did you first get introduced to the poem of Beowulf?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question because I'm not really sure. It's one of those things that's always just been floating around. You sort of become aware of it if you're into that sort of thing. I've always been really into my history and myth side of fantasy, if you like. I think perhaps even starting with something like Talisman and Gary Chalk's artwork, it's all quite UK, right? It's all quite history inflected has always been my preference. So I was always aware of Beowulf. In terms of sort of serious research, that would be through working on the One Ring and researching. For the first edition, we did tons of delving into Tolkien's references and Tolkien's source material, and that involved really getting into Beowulf because there's a lot in Tolkien that is from Beowulf and other similar pieces of literature of the period. And he was an absolute expert in Beowulf, and I'd read his translation of Beowulf as part of working on the One Ring. So when time came to sort of sit down and make a game of our own, it was like, oh, this fits really well.
Right.
I could see this appealing to people that have followed me from the One Ring or what have you. Might find something to like in this without it being, I've never wanted to kind of just file the serial numbers off of things I did in the previous job. It's something new and different.
What do you think it is about the poem that kind of makes it so enduring and so impactful?
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's I always say it's all there, isn't it? In Beowulf, almost the entirety of your sort of traditional fantasy genre is in Beowulf. It hasn't gone far from it, really. So it's it depends what you read, right? There's lots of more exciting new forms emerging at the moment, but for centuries that has defined, fantasy as a genre. And I just think it's a great, people love a sort of melancholy story, right? As well. It's quite miserable towards the end. But it's got the whole, I suspect it endured to when it was written down. We think it's a much older story because it's just got great components. It's sort of wrestling and fighting and people trying to prove themselves and bantering in words, and it's all there. It's great. I love it.
What research then went into? Obviously, you would have read the poem again probably when you were looking at making the Beowulf Age of Heroes, but and then you've got a pretty awesome list of suggested readings at the end of the Beowulf book. Is that kind of your list of research material?
Yeah, pretty much. Most of it's probably over there behind me somewhere, and I'm always adding to it. I really like reading. And always have, and that's always been a part of role-playing games for me. I think the reading side of it, and I really like the research angle. I worked for years. It's a fairly obscure product that Games Workshop did for years and years called Warhammer Historical War Games, and I was the sort of lead artist there, and I really got into sort of the idea of researching stuff for that. And I really enjoy the reading, and I like researching stuff, and I enjoy the process of sort of reading as widely as I possibly can, and then we kind of cook it down and try and present the game so that the players of the games don't need to do that reading, that there's enough there. I think it'll always add to it if you do want to do the reading or you already know stuff about the sort of early medieval period or what have you for Beowulf. But you don't need to do the reading. We sort of try and do it for you. So loads of different books.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the amount of history that you put into the book because I was vaguely aware, but I'd read the poem once before and kind of cultural osmosis from movies and everything. You know a little bit, but then I read the poem again once I was reading through your rule book, and so it gives so much extra historical context that's obviously not really included in the poem. And then I read the foreword that's in my copy, so it gave a bit more. And I was reading another book with my wife that was kind of set at that time period, so it's just like, oh, this is so much stuff that I didn't know, and it all works so well together.
I was going to say there's a thing I really love that we sort of made a great deal of in Beowulf, in that this idea of a much older story that's being told in, say, 800 CE, 1000 CE by a storyteller who is from the sort of early English culture, but it's remembering a sort of ancestor time, we would call it, which just lets you, as a GM and as a player, you can get away with so much. It's not like torturously historical. People who really know the period will frown because you have things like Dane axes and Vendel era helmets in the same. They're quite far apart. They're like 500 years maybe, but it all in the sort of ethos of Beowulf that fits together. I think people at the time who would have at the time of telling the story would be aware of like a Dane axe. This is historical minutiae that doesn't really matter, but for people for whom it does matter, you can mix all that stuff up because they don't know. People in 800 CE don't know that things were a bit different in 500. They're not necessarily aware in the way we are now. So it works. It's good for a role playing game.
That was something I was worried about when I was looking into your game. I was just like, I feel like I'll need to know so much of the specific historical stuff, and same with when like working on the One Ring stuff. I'm just like, there's so much history that I love there, and I don't want to like mess it up. And kind of the same thing carried over to Beowulf. But then reading through the rule book, I was like, you can like, it's an oral history that's maybe not 100% factual.
Yeah, I think both games actually, and I totally hear what you're saying. It's always a worry if you're running a Middle-earth game, which of course I've done loads of, having been creative director on the One Ring first edition for a long time. But there's an empty map, and it's the same to sort of the Whale Road in Beowulf. You can do what you want, really, and actually Middle-earth lets you do that as long as you understand the sort of core values, if you like, that Tolkien's bring to it, or the general ethos of the Age of Heroes. I would sum it up as for Beowulf. And once you get those stuff, the details don't really matter too much.
That leads really well into my next question, which is, what are the themes that GMs and players should bring to Beowulf Age of Heroes that kind of sets it apart from other role-playing games?
I think there's very much, because you play a hero in the game. You are definitely a hero. You sort of stand and fall on your word and your honor, and if you say you're going to do a thing, you do that thing. You are a leader in the game. You have followers, you have a crew. You're responsible for those people. You are not just, whilst you're a wandering hero looking to sort of for fame and glory and monsters to slay, you are a sort of responsible member of the culture in which you find yourself. You are tied into that world. You're not a roaming vagabond like in perhaps a more vanilla D&D experience. You do whatever you want, can't you? Whereas you have a kind of reputation in Beowulf, and you do have to. It depends how you play it, and it depends how your GM plays it. But I love it where followers are disapproving of what the hero is doing. Whether they sort of mutter darkly and chew on herrings and things. If you're going a bit wrong, they're like, no, don't like this. And I think that's really good. Yeah, a moral conscience is definitely in there, I think, as part of the hero thing. As you know, we ditched any idea of alignment in terms of sort of morality, and alignment is replaced by your religious affiliation, and there is no sort of compulsion to be good or bad. You are assumed to be good, broadly speaking. But
I really enjoyed that.
Probably, I think that hand in hand with the duet play, where primarily it's for one player and one GM. You can play it with a group, but primarily it's for one player and one GM. You can really delve into that stuff. You're not fighting for limelight with the way your specific character sees the world. You are free to just explore the world and your relationship with it, which I think works really well as well. These are things that surprised us when we started getting into testing out the duet play, where you go, oh, we can't do this because it will say take up too much time at the table. And then you go, oh no, we can do that because you're the only player. I mean, as long as it's not boring, as long as it's not laborious mechanics. But you'll have seen that we were able to add a few more details into weapons and shields and things that makes them more, we feel, era specific and thematic, that perhaps in a group game might slow the game down a bit too much. But that's not an issue when it's a duet game. So
I really like that additions to it, because sometimes in D&D it can kind of feel like you're just hitting a pinata with a big stick until the points fall out, because you're just trying to
Yeah.
whittle it down
And
to
if there's
zero.
four of you doing it, if everyone's got to get a turn as well, haven't they? And
Yeah.
it's that's something to be aware of, I think, isn't it, as a GM, to just make sure it doesn't become laborious.
The additions to the weapons, and then the defeatable condition or the undefeatable condition with the capital M monsters was something I was like, oh, this should be in every RPG. Like, it's such a good system. It works really well.
It's nice because, of course, there's always been an option in role-playing games and D&D that you, as the GM, you can sort of say, oh, the monsters lose heart and surrender or run away. But that's almost always a fudge, isn't it? Unless it's mechanically enshrined, which we did with the defeatable condition, where people have specific conditions under which they are, they break. And again, that, funnily enough, ties into the sort of cultural thing and the values that we were able to say, if certainly human enemies, if they are broken, if they become defeated, they are defeated. They don't trick you. They're not trying to sort of, they pretend to be defeated and then they come back. It's like they are genuinely defeated. But that slots together with the sort of ethos of the almost the simplistic morality of Beowulf as a poem, that, people do the right thing to be good, that kind of stuff. It all ties together. Yeah.
It makes the creatures feel more alive too, because generally things don't want to die. So if they feel like that's the way it's going to go, they're going to try and get out of there.
Yeah, totally. And it really helps as well with, as you identified, to stop that sort of pinata situation. But also, again, with one player, we didn't necessarily want to have one character we wanted one character to be able to fight multiple enemies and also end a combat if it's getting a bit too long, and if it's not working out, the GM has much more scope to go, oh, actually, you have reached a position where you've defeated the enemies and there's a mechanical route to go, rather than just going, oh, we're a bit really bored, aren't we? Let's end the fight. You've sort of got some controls on your scenery. If you like backstage, you can secretly deploy the defeated condition if you feel the need, and then of course letting enemies and opponents have the defeated condition, as you mentioned, inspires the undefeatable, where that really suddenly matters, that you can't, the big monsters in Beowulf generally just, they can't be killed, which was a really important sort of folkloric mythological thing. Why do heroes exist? Because they're the people that can figure out how to defeat monsters that are otherwise undefeatable. And that's your adventure. There you go. You turn up, find out what the problem is, figure out how to defeat it, do so, that's it.
Yeah, I love the investigation element of this game. Like, I think it would have been very easy to go, oh yeah, I want to make a monster hunting game based off Beowulf. We'll just come up with some cool monsters and that's it. You have this whole extra thing, like the actual killing of the monster is going to be probably a fairly small thing towards the end. It's all this investigation, and I love the way your adventures are written out. Like, I read through the Hermit Sanctuary off the start, and then the one in the book, and then just finished the Trial of the Twin Seas as well. And just the way your NPCs are listed is just like, oh, again, this is a thing that every RPG should be listed this way, that has the different ways to gain advantage or disadvantage on their conversations with them, and then the different things that can affect that. Just like, this is great. It's so straightforward. You can find everything kind of right where you want it to be.
I really want to write I am yet to write a scenario that we publish that obviously they all make use of that setup, but I think you could do a really good one that's the main focus is, actually, if you win the favor of these NPCs, these other NPCs don't want to know you, and really leverage that, and you're between these sort of, but as I'm thinking about the structure of writing it, when it's in progress, I would start with 2 groups, but then I would split those 2 groups sort of across the way, so there were factions within those 2 groups, and it just gets more complicated as you're also all under the sort of rules of hospitality in the mead hall, so nobody can openly be you can't even be really rude to each other. Perhaps there's precedent for that in Beowulf, but that is the adventure I think could be really cool, and I keep meaning to write it, but it's part of a very long list of things to do. But yeah, it's there if you want it,
and then how did you decide where did you make the decision to have it duet play instead of kind of a more standard version?
I always say these things are like really good questions and I can't remember, but actually we've got all the development logs. We used a Discord, server to develop all this. So I could actually scroll back, 2 years of messages and find out. I do think it all came about around the same time where we had the opportunity, as we started Handiwork Games, we had a small team, we looked at what we were good at. And so there was things like the interest in the sort of early medieval period, the interest in Tolkien's influences, the idea I have an audience for my artwork that is it is what it is, it's that kind of historical based mythy stuff. And we wanted to make sure we used all of those sort of qualities that we had as a team. 5e, again, Jacob, co-creator, David, co-creator, were really expert on 5e. I know a lot more about it now than I did when I started. Right. I was fairly proficient off the back of Adventures in Middle-earth. What is it called now? One Ring. No, the Lord of the Rings role-playing game is called now, isn't it? In the second edition, yeah. But the first edition of Adventures in Middle-earth, yeah, we'd all worked on that and liked what you could do with 5e, and wanted to sort of carry on some of the stuff and maybe revisit some of the things that we would have liked to have done differently with that. And again, with the knowledge of Tolkien's influences, really fascinated me. The more time I worked on Tolkien stuff, the more interested I became primarily in his antecedents and the things he was interested in, perhaps a little bit more than Middle-earth even, which seems a bit weird to say that, but it's true. Yeah. And then, out of that, we were looking at sort of Beowulf, I think, and the idea that Beowulf, he's a lone hero, it's just one person. And then, I don't know who suggested it, but when someone says we could make 5e for one player, and you just go, yes, that's it, that's the thing, that's the secret sauce for this. This is because you can make games however you want and just hope people like them, but we try and build in something that's a big hook to anything we do. So the problem Beowulf solves is it's really hard to manage a gaming group, right? Who manages to schedule 4 or 5 people, weekly is like a nightmare. We're all so busy. It's all cliched stuff, but we are all so busy now. And it was a delight dealing with playtesters where you could hear the penny dropping from a great height. I just have to phone one person. Yeah. I don't have to sync schedules. I can just phone, and we know people who are playing. My earphones are falling out. We know people who are playing an individual Beowulf campaign with all of their gaming group separately, and then if people can't make it to the session, you've got like 4 campaigns of Beowulf running at the same time as fill-in sessions. So I don't know how they manage it. I can't remember what's happening in just one game, but people are doing it, and it's working for them.
Awesome. And then where the decision to use the 5e rules? Was there ever talk of making your own system, or was it kind of an easy choice?
No, do you know what? There wasn't, and a few people have said to us, "Oh, why do you use 5e?" Blah 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 blah. I like it, and Jacob likes it, David likes it. I'm speaking to David this week. He's kind of really got into Shadow Dark at the moment, so we've been talking around that. But I just, for me, obviously, Dungeons and Dragons is the big dog in the room, right? Whatever you think of it, it has the biggest amount of players. For me, 5e is one of it'll see me hesitate to say it. It's one of the best iterations of the game. I know that will upset a lot of people, but I just like it. It's just it's easy to play, I find. I understand some of the issues people have with it. It's maybe not as granular as some folks would like, or not as deadly as some folks would like, but these seem like fairly easy things to overcome, to be honest.
Sure.
So I just like it. It's as simple as that, and that's where a big part of the audience is, and we enjoyed working on the system. So those two things together.
And then I don't know how much of this you can talk about. So obviously earlier in this year there was the open gaming license thing that happened. How would that have affected you?
It was a really bad time, actually. Through January, we kind of lost January to that, because early on as well, there was a sort of concern that because the open gaming license was I could say whatever I like, as long as I historically, I have always tried, and in teams I've been in, we have always tried to really respect the spirit of the OGL and the fact Wizards opened that up, right? We owe them a lot for that. I'm not someone that leaps to bash them at every opportunity, because I also understand they're sort of peers and people working in the same kind of job, albeit in a higher profile capacity. So I am respectful of certainly the creative people, and indeed, again, it's too easy to go, oh, it's the management suite or whatever making all these decisions. People have reasons for doing what they do, and we won't necessarily know why. But come January, that was all a bit off the table, because that was a pretty dirty move that was planned, because this is supposed to be forever. Whether you can weasel out of that by using the wording of the contract seemed a little bit to be missing the point. I was very happy it went the way it went in the end. But during that, and I say that because January was just awful, because there was a suspicion that it could be retroactively applied and we wouldn't be able to sell our games anymore. And if you've got a warehouse full of copies of Beowulf that you have planned to sell over the year and reprint at some point, and suddenly if you can't sell those, what do you do? It's sort of disastrous. We started making some plans. I know everyone was running around declaring new systems and so on, some of whom I have more respect for the people that did it really early and went really hard. I think Cobalt Press were great in that they just went, right, we're doing our own, that's it. And they just went for it. That was great. But slowly there's been this trickle of other people were joining in on that. And I don't know, I sat tight, and we made some plans. We've never announced what they were. We had a backup plan. But I don't think any of us wanted to redo all the work again. Yeah. Right? Beowulf is for 5e, and we like it for 5e. It was built to work sort of very sympathetically with 5e, and I like to think I'm really warming up to being contentious now. I like to think we do good work, right? And I'm a bit above redoing it all. I just don't want to do that. I'll do a new game. We'll do something else. I don't want to go back and redo it all because somebody has changed their mind on a license. That seems just not how I want to live. These things take maybe a year, 2 years to produce. I'm not doing it. I've got better things to waste my time on, So yeah, that was a tough time. It was a really tough time. And it could have killed us completely. And it was, hard. I guess when you play with other people's toys, you've got to be aware that this sort of thing can happen. But gosh, yeah. Like I say, I was glad when it went away. I still have some frustration that it all went away in what was that about? What was the point of all of that upset? Literally sleepless nights for a month because what are we going to do? Hey, it's all okay, I think.
So back to the game itself. What were the kind of the most fun, rewarding, and then challenging aspects of doing this setting?
Cool. So yeah, definitely fun things is definitely doing the reading and the research, and it's a real passion of mine. This week, I'm going to be doing some blogging about the saga of Rolf Krake, which is a sort of maybe a precursor to Beowulf, maybe a parallel story to Beowulf. It shares a lot of characters, and that sort of stuff I really, really love. I finally got my hands on Tolkien's Battle of Maldon book they put out recently, and reading that was just amazing. I just love it. It's so good. It's a real sort of passion project all round, and remains that. Obviously doing artwork is just, that feels like cheating in life. Just mucking about, drawing some stuff I like drawing. I'm very blessed, to be able to do that for at least in part of my living. Challenging stuff. I'm just thinking in terms of the development of Beowulf. Gosh, followers took a long time to get right, to get it to do what we wanted it to do. Right. In some ways, I would like to. We will be reprinting. We're just about out of Beowulf: Age of Heroes, so we've got a reprint coming up, and I might swap out a few, because really it's quite. It's much more affordable to reprint a book with no changes than to print a new book. But you can do something called page replaces, where you put in a couple of new pages. It doesn't cost you as much as starting from scratch. Okay. And I might do a couple of page replaces on followers. I think over the couple of years. How long has it been out now? 3 years, 4 years? I think we could describe some things with a bit more elegance than when it was quite new, and we've played it for years now. So
Yeah.
you could go, it's this thing, this is the way to think about it. And with feedback from customers, most people we found pick it up really easily. The idea that followers are quite abstract, they're not characters in the way that your character and an NPC and a monster is. I'm actually writing a thing for a digital pack, it's nearly done, to further explain those kind of concepts and where they came from for folks, because some folks really don't get it on first read. And I think if you're someone who naturally understands that sort of thing, it can be quite hard to understand how someone else isn't understanding it, if that makes sense.
The followers was one of the early things that really drew me to the game. I was just like, oh, looks like a very good system, because I've talked about before, kind of fear or worrying about your character when hit points are so easy to regain. Going into battle isn't as scary. Yeah. Having things like a follower could very easily die, but you might have put a lot of work into them. It makes you a lot more cautious and has something that you can kind of take away from a player if they're being silly.
There's a really interesting thing in that system that really sums up why it was hard to come up with from scratch, is the way that followers die from death saves.
Yes.
That's really tragic in play, because it's just like, no, Wiglaf has died, and it's sort of cruel almost, but it provides a sort of, it gives you something in the game. I think it's a very simple way of doing it. It's easy to do, but gosh, it sort of reverberates, and you can, it's quite, cinematic is an overly used term, but you sort of imagine your hero like looking around to see this sort of tragic event unfold, that sort of stuff is exactly where it's at for me, trying to get it simple but not simplistic, that it's easy to play but it works really well, and it provides you something at the table that we do the hard work so you don't have to, is sort of the idea. We spent 6 months going, no, it's not that rule. Yeah. These rules are no good. We're going to have to start again. Another one that was like that was the alignment die. Okay. Where when you roll with, just for people listening who haven't read the book, when you roll with inspiration, you roll a dice that one of the D20s is representative of your alignment, and if you choose that one, even if it's the lower number, you gain inspiration, which sort of, you are instantly paid back. And we were trying to make this sort of weird. Initially, we were aware of the fact that perhaps we should tap into, for followers of the old ways, they're quite doom laden and this sort of northern melancholy that Tolkien speaks about. That they would accept their sort of fate, they're weird from the the way the dice fall, they're sort of doom laden. And then perhaps for followers of the book, for the sort of Christian characters, they would receive some sort of divine inspiration. It was like the sort of spread of Christianity historically was kind of, in some ways you could read it, I am not a Christian, let me say up front, but you could read there's this sort of hopefulness to it, that like you can have a sort of personal relationship with God, and things will be better after you die if you're a good person. These are quite unique kind of ideas in the world at this point, rather than just like, Woden doesn't care about you. Why would you're just nothing? But I mean, let's not get into a real world historical debate. But in the game, you can really play those things up. But it was really hard to do, and the numbers we were trying to sort of make that you used almost like a different system depending on what alignment your character was. Okay. And by gosh, that was not working for the longest time. And it was Jacob, actually. This is something I definitely know down to Jacob. He went, I've thought up this, does this work? And it's like, oh, hallelujah, that's it. That's the way it works. It's complicated ideas expressed simply in mechanics, which is very difficult to do. But yeah, that stuff. There was a question here. What was it? Challenging, fun.
Yeah, fun, rewarding, and challenging.
Oh, rewarding has definitely been just the community that's built up around the game, and making real friends with people that play it, and chat on our Discord community. And there's just some really nice people involved. Yeah. And I think the nature of the setting sort of brings together a certain type of person, if you like, that is interested in that stuff, and we have a lot in common with them, and it's been really nice. It's been really great to make just genuine relationships with our customers, and we like to be present, if you like, and really chat to people. And yeah, it's good. So yeah, glad we did it.
Going back, so you've got your pretty terrific list of reading resources. Is there any novels that you're a fan of? I don't think there's any novels in the reading list, but any novels that are in this time period or kind of cover these themes?
I'm trying to think. I tend to just read the historical stuff these days. I'm trying to think. For years and years, I had various authors who are famous for writing this period thrust at me by friends, and I don't necessarily get on with them.
All right.
Tolkien, read Tolkien, and Tolkien's the way to go. Or I love poetry wise. I love Seamus Heaney's Beowulf. I love Maria Davana Headley's Beowulf. Absolutely brilliant stuff. No, I'm not a massive. I tend to read like science fiction, spaceship style science fiction if I'm reading or like literature stuff, Cormac McCarthy, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm a bit rubbish when it comes to I
guess now we can move on to the new big news, which is just this week. Your King Beowulf Kickstarter has gone live, and you've already passed your first goals. Tell me, what was the inspiration? What is King Beowulf?
So King Beowulf is about moving your game on from being a wandering monster slayer into ruling a kingdom in the same way that Beowulf does in the poem. 50 years past Beowulf, we return to Beowulf, and he's a king, and he has very different concerns than he had when he's a sort of wandering young buck up to no good in Denmark. This is something we've talked a lot about. Higher level play for 5th edition is not necessarily super well supported. I think this also began life as a project that Jacob really wanted to take on, and so Jacob developed the first stage of it. It then passed to me to sort of develop on those ideas, and I've been hammering the sort of Jacob's initial manuscript has the bones of it, of the sort of things you do, and then I'm sort of torturing it by hammering it into that like simple but not simplistic and fun to play at the table stuff that really brings it up to the sort of I don't know, the kind of thing we want to put out basically. So Jacob's done the skeleton of it, and I'm sort of adding the flesh to that. That's really horrible, isn't it? It's like flesh and bones and all that. Look, I've got one here. Look, there's a copy of King Beowulf.
There we go.
It's already out of date because it hasn't got the we've unlocked Spot UV on the cover because all our books have that. Amazing. I've got one there.
Yeah, I love
Can
it.
I get a light to work? That's good. That. So it's going really well. It was a massive relief because I don't know if people are aware, we had a lot of problems with delivering the Trials of the Twin Seas, the aptly named Trials of the Twin Seas. All of our rewards for US backers were stolen. It's still a bit of a mystery. The criminal investigation is ongoing. We replaced them all kind of out of our own pocket, which was pretty tough and will continue to be tough for a while. People have been hugely supportive, but you just don't know, will people go, yeah, but I'm not going to back your next thing because, like this, you did it wrong. Whereas we couldn't really stop someone stealing a pallet of books. I don't really know what we could have done differently. It's been really well. It's really gone really, really well. I'm incredibly happy with how it's gone. I'm always really bowled over and choked when you fund. We funded in 2 hours, and you're like, wow, okay, and this is amazing. It's going really well, and this sort of higher level play stuff. I think in the end version, I've realized there's not necessarily a requirement that you be a high level character to become a ruler and make use of all the rules and procedures for running a kingdom. But if you do it at quite a low level, you don't stand a chance. You just, you can do it if you want, but it's going to be really difficult. I think it's going to be the final, the sort of setup there. A bit like a lot of it is something we hit on in Age of Heroes is about giving you procedures and structures to make use of the rules, if you like, to bring you that experience. And there's a lot of that, I think. There are some new rules in it. Obviously, like it's a whole book of how you set up a kingdom, how it all functions, to make a fun play experience. A lot of it is about the structure. So it's about the turning seasons in the year and what each season brings to your kingdom. In between those events, you can still do your adventures as a regular hero. If you want, I think there's a little bit of a cost to your kingdom if you're absent all the time. But yeah, 4 times a year, you have a big festival at your mead hall, and that's when you get your gifts from your kingdom, and you decide how, that's got a monetary value essentially, and you decide how to spend that to maintain your kingdom and grow it and improve things for the people that live there and so on. And there's all like massive threats, just like in the poem, It's a little bit. There's been some great stuff in playtesting where, for example, we haven't spoken about it, this is all pretty exclusive. Like if a dragon, a kingdom level dragon, turns up, the shire that it lands in sort of instantly no longer pays you any kind of tribute. It's done, and then the next season that will spread. So you could it'll bankrupt your kingdom in like 3 seasons. So you're going to have to deal with that dragon and stuff like that. And you better hope you prepared sufficiently and you've got a prosperous enough kingdom that you can raise a field of warriors to go and take it out, or you may have to go and do it yourself. But we're trying to steer. I want clear water between what you would do as your character versus kingdom affairs, if you like, so that it's an important issue when you make the transition into a kingdom level game, that your player doesn't just go, oh, I just go and do it myself. I go and dig all the ditches. I go and secure the trade routes, and that's not what it is. That would be a regular Age of Heroes adventure. So it's taking it up and setting it all up so it's really good fun, and you really invest in your kingdom in the same way you invest in your followers. And I think we've got that bit nailed. That once you've played through a couple of seasons, you'll be quite protective of your kingdom. It's like, hey, so that's cool.
Or how much of your original character will be using, and how much the choices of like leveling up, does that affect when you're King Beowulf?
Your character will still exist as a separate character. Your kingdom runs from a kingdom character sheet, so that it uses a lot of the same kind of rules. It has the same ability scores. Your kingdom levels up, your kingdom gains XP, which will also provide your ruler character with XP as well, as a sort of consequence of leveling up your kingdom. So there is still an incentive to sort of sit on the treasure seat, sit on the throne and rule your kingdom. You will still get to level up. I imagine most people, this is another one that will be interesting to see how people deal with it when it's out in the wild. I imagine most people will do a bit of both. And certainly I want the kingdom game, if you like, can be run at quite a low level. Not a low level is a terrible expression to use when you talk about D&D. It can run it with low detail in the background, but you will want to get involved. It could just roll along, and you could almost do a sort of seasonal report, and you go, oh, you've got this much money to spend. What do you want to do? But hopefully players will want to be a lot more involved in that than that. So it's striking all those kind of balances.
And how has been doing the mechanics and working on a game on this scale differed from the other ones you've worked on?
I tell you something, I'm going to do an update about this maybe today, maybe tomorrow. It's been really interesting when you start to think of. So if you start to think about a kingdom as a character, what does that mean mechanically within 5e? And then you look at, so what does a normal character do? And how would that work for a larger sort of body of, if it was just scale it up to an organization, if you like. What does that mean? And then you learn all this stuff about normal role-playing game characters, and it's really blown my mind in a whole lot of different ways, like kingdom adventures, because I want there to be able to be scenarios that your GM is presenting you to play through. Now, when you talk about a character, just a hero character, that seems very normal, right? There's a scenario and you've got to play through it. But when you come to, I've got a scenario for your kingdom to play through, you just go, well, hang on, that all seems a bit pre-written, a bit prescriptive. But that's what you do for a character. So why does that seem prescriptive? Why does having a plot for what's going to unfold through the year for your kingdom, why does that seem a bit weird when you first think about it? The other really amazing thing is, I love this so much. Your character in a D&D game moves through a location, right? So your avatar, if you like, moves through. But when it's your kingdom, events move through your kingdom. The kingdom is static and events move through the kingdom. So space becomes time, and then my brain starts going out of my ear. but it's really good. If we could, I'm still, there's a few things I really want to nail down. We're at the point where we're ready to, be crowdfunding this, but, we need the whole thing finished to really make sure all of these different gears all work together really well. Luckily, we've got plenty of experience doing that, but it's exciting and frightening at the same time. But this idea, that space in a dungeon, if you like, becomes time in the year. So you don't move from chamber A to chamber B. You move from this month to that month.
Yeah.
And you go, so what does it? What does that mean? I love it. It's great. I'm really excited by it. It's really good, and it's offering something really unique, I think.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to talk about this yet. We're in the middle of the Kickstarter, but what is next for you, either with Beowulf or with Handiwork Games?
So we're kind of moving into the sort of the next phase, if you like, of Handiwork Games. We've been a bit set back, but when I say a bit set back, the OGL thing and the pallet theft, and we've had some quite serious team members have been quite ill over the last couple of years. Okay. That has all set us back a little bit, understandably. But we're moving into this sort of new phase where we've got a whole bunch of new stuff coming through, which, King Beowulf is part of. I wrote a game called Mask Witches of Forgotten Doggerland. We've got Mask Witches 2 coming, which is just nuts. We've got some stuff we haven't announced yet. What can I say about it? Because we haven't, it's not that it's super secret, but I'd like to do a big announcement of that. Sure. So I'm not going to tell you anything about it. That's fine. But we've also got 5 Evil, which Morg Davey, who did the mechanical side of A-State 2nd edition for us. 5 Evil is really brilliant. We've been playtesting that. And that just explodes 5e to do horror with it. And it's so different. It's so, and again, there's a lovely interplay between Morg was quite inspired by Beowulf and just a way we think in Beowulf to sort of take 5e apart and make it do what we want. And in really simplistic terms, imagine, say, the action economy of 5e, if the big horror monster, if it could take an action for every action you take or the party take, you suddenly go like, we've got, and say, if it attacked you, it killed you, because that's sort of what, I don't know, you pick a Freddy or something, I don't know, complicated Freddy's, I've not come prepared to pitch this game, but it's messing with parts of 5e in a really smart way, where you're used to 1 + 1 = 2, and this is going, no, because it's a horror game, it's 1 + 1 = like 5. And in playtest, the horror aspect was absolutely brilliant, where it's like a practical sort of horror where you go, my character cannot get out of this. The first playtest game, I decided privately, as a bit of a secret agenda, what if my character decided to just leave the scenario? If you like, go, no, this is crazy, I'm not going into the cellar, I'm not going to do any of the things people in horror movies do, I'm just leaving. And thereby, because Morg is an absolutely brilliant writer and GM, I thereby discovered the scenario literally was, get out. That, yes, well done, John. You are attempting to do what you're supposed to do, and I was a bit annoyed. This is a bit, this is too good. No, it's good, really good. So very excited about 5 Evil. There'll be more on that sort of post King Beowulf, which is obviously just all the focus is on King Beowulf at the moment. But we've got a lot of stuff coming, and it's all really good. We've got a backdrops book, which again, I keep doing these things that I think are just going to be a little side project, and then they really take off. So we'll be doing a second round of backdrop books, hopefully before the end of the year, actually. We're only in October, so we'll do backdrops book 2 maybe next month, if I can get all the parcels sent out for backdrops 1, it's all going well. So lots going on, loads, too much.
Awesome. And then basically as my final question, or one of my final questions, would be, what advice would you have for somebody looking to get into the RPG industry?
Gosh, I used to, in my earlier days, I used to give loads of advice to sort of fellow artists and so on. And I've really got out of practice, because I suddenly, I suddenly got really self-conscious about it. But no, I will answer this. I will answer this question. I just want to give. I got self-conscious about giving actually good advice, and everyone has different reasons. Oh, I'll tell you what. I've got it that I used to say. This is going to sound really esoteric, but when you are making efforts to get into a job you want in the industry, I think it's really important to know what it is you're doing as you take actions. Know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and I think that's really, really important for finding success on your own terms, and ultimately happiness on your own terms. That and even just getting success, full stop, of any kind. Just know, be mindful of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and also make sure you are doing things that you want to do, not just what someone said. Oh, you need to do this. I certainly, going back 30 years or something, trying to get into being a professional artist, and all my friends trying to be supportive, genuinely trying to be supportive, would go, "Oh, you should do this, you should do that." And you can just run around like a headless chicken trying to do all this received wisdom stuff that doesn't, it's not necessarily right. I know that's not very helpful. That's like an absence of advice. That's like the opposite of advice. But not thinking carefully about what you do, and work hard, which sounds crazy. Work hard at what you do and make sure you're good at what you do to the best of your ability, I think, is really important. I was laughing, for our Kickstarter stuff, where we're going, this book will be this many pages. And I just went, who am I kidding? It's going to be as long as it needs to be. Beowulf was supposed to be about 50 pages shorter. But you go, but come on, if you're going to do it well. There's another really good piece of advice is don't wait for an opportunity to show your best work or your best self. Just do it now. Do it now. Don't. I've known far too many illustrators that have struggled going, but if one day I'll be paid enough to do my best work. And I'm really sorry to break it to you, but that's not going to happen. You've got to do your best work now, and then you'll get rewarded, And that's kind of a tricky relationship to navigate, because you always end up doing more work really than you're supposed to be doing. But if there's people like me out there doing that, then they're going to beat you, aren't they? So anyway,
where can people find you online and the Beowulf Kickstarter?
So if you just search King Beowulf on Kickstarter, that will take you there. Or if you head to handiwork.games, that's our website, and there are links all over it to everything that we do. So that's the best place to go. And we're on, if you search up Handiwork Games, we're on all of the social medias. It's all good.
Thanks again for joining us, and thanks for making such an amazing RPG. I love it.
Thank you so much.